Welcome back, game developers. Today we're going to be replicating the push an object mechanic from Outlast, where you interact with an object and while you walk forward you can push it out of the way. This is usually to discover doorways or pathways or something like that, where it's a pretty cool feature to immerse your players and give a realistic feel to your game. This is a bit more of an advanced tutorial and took a decent amount of time compared to the others, so it would be really appreciated if you guys could like, subscribe, and comment down below more videos you guys would like to see in the future. Before we get started, if you would like to support me, get all the files you're seeing today and from every other tutorial I've done, get early access to videos, as well as see your name along with the other people here, I have a link from a Patreon down below. Alright, with that being said, let's get right into the tutorial. The first thing we're going to want to do is actually go to our first person folder and navigate to our BP_first person character. It might take a second because this is the first time me loading this project today, but all we want to do basically is go to this logic right here, our movement input logic that we did for our previous tutorial where we were sliding across right here, where we were sliding in this doorway. This is a Resident Evil component, but we're going to be using some of the same logic, so we want to navigate this and change it up a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the bottom left, we're going to add a new Boolean variable, and it's just going to be as simple as move right puzzle. And we're going to add that variable, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to make us differentiate between if it's a move right puzzle or a move forward puzzle, because if you're pushing an object you're moving forward versus if you're going through this you're moving right. So it makes it so it's a little bit easier for us to differentiate. Great, so let's disconnect this really quickly. We can just disconnect right there and bring this down a little bit, and we will actually be creating a branch, so you can left click and hold control and B, and then you will, or excuse me, left click and hold B, and then you'll be able to create a branch. And we will be creating a branch and doing it like so, and off of the true condition you're going to want to do as we did prior, so we can get rid of this reroute node and just connect it just like so. And the condition is going to be the move right puzzle, the one we just created. And off of the false, we're actually not going to do anything. This is the way that we can differentiate it, as well as like save some performance. It's basically the same exact performance loss, because we're going straight into this anyways, and if it's not this condition, then it's going to do nothing regardless, so there's no difference in performance. Let's make sure to compile and save, and make sure that you set this to be true by default, and we can compile and save, and that won't really matter because we're going to be overriding it anyways, but we might as well just do that just so we can have good practice and so it aligns with my other projects, so everything is more likely to work. Great, so let's go out of this and let's create our blueprint that we want so we can start creating the system. So let's create let's right click in our folder and let's create a blueprint class of type actor, and let's call it BP_pushable object. And this will be basically where we can navigate all of our different objects that we want to push. Let's open it up, let's dock it so we can see it a little bit bigger. And the first thing we want to do is of course add a static mesh. So let's add a static mesh component. We can keep it just like so, and we can put anything in there. For now we'll leave it blank, but I'm going to import a mesh in a second so we can actually have a mesh right there. But let's add another component. Let's add a box collision, and we're going to need two of them actually. We're going to want a start box 1, or a start box collision, and we can just duplicate this and call this one end box collision. And we're going to want to change some of the properties on these. So for the end box collision, let's just make the location 100, so it's a little bit farther away, and let's change the scaling a little bit, so let's do 1.25, and let's make it so it's not all like this, and let's make this 1, and let's make this 3.5, so it's more vertically tall. Great, and then we're going to make sure we do the same with this one, so we could just copy all properties from the transform and do that same thing to the start. And we can paste, and then we just want to change this location to -100, so it's on opposite sides. Now for our static mesh, you can use any mesh that you would like. I'm going to be importing a mesh that I found from Sketchfab, so let me find that mesh right now. This is the mesh I found, so if you would like to follow along and use the exact same mesh I have, you can find this one by Sanzid on Sketchfab, and you can download it and import it into your game. So I'll import it and we'll continue from there. Great, so I imported the mesh right here, so you can see it just like this. It originally came as a .dae file, but there's websites online where you can transform a .dae to a .fbx, so it's very simple to change. I'm just going to change the material to m_bookshelf, just so that it's all aligned well, and we can change this to sm_bookshelf. And as you can see, if you look at the little preview, it's a very small mesh, so we're going to have to size that up in our actual editor so we can make it the size that we actually would like. But let's go to our textures. Let me import the textures as well. So here are the textures, and I won't bother renaming these just for the tutorial's sake. So let's just open this up, and if you don't know how to texture something like this, we can simply just drag all of these, drag them all in, and we can arrange them to their proper values. So this one would be roughness, and after roughness we'll go to our next node. So this is albedo, so we'll just put that to base color because that's what albedo is. Albedo is base color. We'll grab the next one. This is AO, which is ambient occlusion, and so on. So we'll just plug them in really quickly. So here is the normal map. We'll put that right into normal. Great, so that we can save everything and apply, and now we can go straight back to our mesh right here, and it should have the material on it. Let me see if I go back to it. Yes, it does. Great. So what I'll do then is I'll go back to our pushable object. I will go to our static mesh, and I will put that static mesh right in here. Even though it's small right now, we're going to be changing that dynamically per mesh, so it's a little bit more customizable for all of us using it, using this system. So don't worry about the mesh size right now, just worry about the fact that we actually have the mesh, so that's good. Next thing we want to do is let's go to our add right here, so we can add another component. Let's add a camera component because we're going to be using a camera, and we don't want it to make a child of the mesh. Let's just change it to we can just keep it as camera, and let's change the location of the camera to be something like -125 because we want it to be over here-ish, and let's change the Z value to be 55, excuse me, so it matches around where the player's head would be. And then let's make sure that we also grab our interaction. So when we stand into this area, it shows our interaction icons. If you don't want that, you don't have to have that. But thankfully we have made that a lot of times on this channel. So we will go to our obstruction wall, and we can copy that same exact code, so we have the same exact thing. So here's our collision 1 interaction icon. So we can just copy this and paste. And if you don't have this, we can go over it very simply. Basically, there's just an inner collision and an outer collision. So this is the outer collision and the inner collision, and basically when you step into the inner sphere collision, it will show these billboards. So this is a billboard right here that is an icon, and another billboard right here, and it basically just makes it so if you walk into the inner sphere, it'll only show the inner, but if you walk into or it'll show the inner and the outer, but if you walk into only the outer, it'll only show the outer. It's a little bit confusing, but if you watch the video, it will explain it a little bit more on the channel for the interact icons. Yeah, so I will be copying this and bringing this over to our blueprint so we don't have to do as much. But before we do that, let's just make sure we go on the left and we actually have these nodes. So let's go to inner sphere collision 1 and inner interaction icon 1, and let's do the same with outer for 1, and we'll copy, and we will go to the pushable object, and let's just go here and let's paste. So we have the same exact thing. And what we'll do is we'll just move it so it's at the same location. So let's just move it over here and bring them right to where it would be interactable, right about there-ish. And we can make this dynamically change if we want as well, but just for now, let's just keep it like this. So that's where it would be if you were looking at it normally. Great, so like I said previously, we're going to want to make this pretty customizable and be able to change all this from the actual blueprint. So what we can do is we can go to our construction script, which is used to change all these things per blueprint basis, but in a way that only runs once before it's actually ran, and not during the game. So basically it just makes a save performance during the game. Great, so let's go off of our construction script and let's add 4 different pins, so 0 to 3. And let's add a if branch, and let's go off of this if branch, and we're going to basically do the first one we like to do, which is debugging. We want to see if we're debugging, and we're trying to find all the correct values. So if we're doing that, let's do debugging, and let's just make that a public variable and instance editable, and let's just put it right into here, and we can compile, and right up here you can see that now it is an instance editable public variable, and off of true, we're going to basically change these two to be set hidden in game. So we can set hidden in game, and we basically want to make it so they're not hidden in the game, and so they are actually visible to us. Great, so that's one step done. We can move it and make it look a little bit more clear if we do it like so. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're basically going to want to change the location of the character once it spawns in. So the way that we have the system set up is, let's go to our first person, our blueprints, and let's drag it in. The way that we have it actually set up is if the character walks into the range where it is supposed to be spawned, you interact with the bookshelf or whatever it is that you want to push, it will basically respawn the character in a new location based on the arrow. and it is going to make it so you can then be pushing the book with your arms, but it needs to be at a very specific position so that your arms are actually in contact with the bookshelf. So what we'll do is, let's go back to our pushable object and let's make it so we can dynamically change the location of the camera and the start arrow, so that we can make it match with the animation that we create. Great, so let's go to our, oh, that's one thing I forgot. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. Let's create an arrow as well, because I completely forgot to create an arrow, and that's the main thing we're gonna need. So let's create an arrow, and let's just call it start arrow. And let's make sure that we get the properties right. So let me just index that from my other project. So yeah, we're gonna want to have minus 130 right here and minus 90 right here, and everything else the same. So this will make a little bit more sense. So you'll see right here is where we're going to basically be spawning the character right here, and this will be the new player character, or new player camera, excuse me, for when you're actually interacting with this object. Again, we have to change the mesh to make it a little bit more of the size that we actually want, but it'll make more sense in a moment. So let's get that start arrow, let's drag that in, and let's just basically get the world location of that start arrow, just like so. And we're going to want to add that. So we're going to add this vector with a new vector that will be our variable, and we're going to call this character offset location. So basically that arrow is our location, but if our animations don't align, we can always adjust this character offset location so it will align correctly. So we can go off of this and we can just set world location, and it'll set the world location of the start arrow. And we can actually just get rid of this and plug that one in, so it's a little bit easier for us. Great, so let's just move this just like so, and let's move this down, and so it's a little bit more aligned. So basically it's going to get the star arrow and it's going to get the world location, and once it gets the world location, it's going to add it by whatever vector we put in, and it's going to produce a new world location, not world offset. So let's make sure set world location, not set world offset. So we're going to want to do it that way. It's basically going to produce a new location for us that is going to work with our animations. So conversely, let's do the exact same thing, but let's do it for our camera. So let's grab our camera, and we're going to basically do the same thing. We're going to get the relative location, however, because it is in our actual blueprint, we're not indexing to anything else. So let's get our relative location, and let's add that by the camera, or well, let's make this a variable. That's why I didn't pop up. We want to make this a variable, and we're basically just going to want to make this camera offset location. And this is very similar to the other ones, by the way. Both of them had to be public and instance editable. It's very similar. It's the same exact concept. We're just going to be making it so we could then set relative location, and it will be the same thing. This will be our new location. By the way, both of these are the exact same thing. I wanted to do one with world location and one with relative location to show you that it won't really matter which one you choose. But if you were indexing to a different variable and trying to set that relative location, it would a different blueprint, not different variable. If you were trying to get this from, for example, the first person character and then trying to set the relative location, that could cause you issues because it's not in that blueprint. So it might mess up like with the actual location. So in that case, you'll want to use set world location. But if you're in the same blueprint, it doesn't really matter if you use world location or relative. So I decided you can use either. And so I decided to use relative for one. Just so you guys know, it doesn't really make a difference in this case. Great, so let's just move them a little bit forward so it's a little bit more organized. That's good. And let's go off of our last one, and let's actually make it so we can set the world mesh size and 3D and everything, like the scale, the actual mesh that we want to use. And for a couple other reasons, we're going to make sure we set it right here so it saves performance. So let's go off of this static mesh, and let's basically set the world scale 3D. Right, so we can actually make it so we can change this per mesh or per blueprint, and so it won't make that big of a difference. So let's right click on this and let's put this to a variable, and let's just call this object scale. And so now we have object scale. Again, we're going to make it public so we can change this whenever we want to. And then we're going to then grab this static mesh again so we can go out here, get the static mesh, and let's also set the static mesh to be whatever static mesh we want. So it doesn't have to just be this bookshelf. You can make it whatever one you want. So what we'll do is we can right click on this and promote this to a variable as well and make it straight. And then let's call this one object mesh. And conversely, let's make this public as well. So now we have our customization set up so that we can dynamically create multiple different meshes and change their position with our animation, as well as check and see their exact location if we want to debug or anything like that. So we have a pretty good system set right here. Let's bring this down. The next thing we can do is we can go to our variables and actually give them categories. So we can call this debug. We can make these two under character, or just like settings if you want to. It doesn't really matter. We'll make it character settings, and then we'll make this one also go under character settings, and then we'll make this one go under object settings, and this one will also be object settings. A couple things we're going to want to change really quickly. Just make sure that you have your scale set at 1, 1, and 1. And if you want to make it so your object always has a mesh placeholder, we can just go to our construction script, just change this to be our bookshelf, for example, or whatever you're using. And so then when you're always in here, it'll have a placeholder. But if you scroll down now, you'll see that each one of these will have its own category. So we have a debug, a character settings, and an object settings. So if we wanted to change our location of our character or camera, we go to character settings, object settings, obviously pretty self-explanatory, and so on. So let's go to here and let's change the scale of this object just so we can see it. So let's change it to 100, 100, and 100. I found that was a pretty good size, and you can see right here, this is how it would look a little bit. Great, and let's go back here and let's go to our pushable object. And I just remembered, let's actually go to our camera, and we have some rotations that we want to give it just so it feels more realistic. So let's go to the camera and let's just change it to 4.5, 1.6, and this is all for rotation, by the way, and then 2.5. So now it'll have a little bit of a curve to it, which will look basically around the object that you're actually looking at, giving it more of like a realistic feel. So another thing that we're going to be utilizing in this blueprint comparatively to this blueprint in our object obstruction wall, we want to make sure we utilize the blink mechanic that we used before, which is also just the fade camera mechanic, but I do it really quickly so it kind of looks like a blink. And instead of making it like not immersive, it kind of makes it more immersive because it looks more like a blink than anything else. So we can go to our pushable object, let's go to our event graph, and let's make sure that we can actually do it all together. Let's copy our camera fade event, and let's copy our camera or our collision one icon. So we can do both of them at the same time. Let's just grab those over and drag them all so they all are highlighted. We can do that. Go back to our pushable object. We can delete these because we're going to be adding it when we need them. And now you can see that we have both. So let's just bring this up here. And let's bring these as well. And the reason why I grabbed all of these first and copied and pasted them from the other object was because I wanted these to automatically know which ones I was talking about and not have to do that later. So you can see everything compiles in the first try because they're all named the same thing. Great, so we have some of the main mechanics done. And if you want to see this blink camera effect without having to go to that video, I'll show it very quickly. We're just basically going to make a camera manager input multiple floats for the start fade time, the duration between, and the end fade time. And we're going to basically start a camera fade with that camera manager as the target. And you can basically change the duration between the fading that originally happens and the fading that happens at the end, and the fading or the darkness in between. So you can make it look like a blink, or you can make it look more like an exaggerated fade in and fade out. So after this, let's go to our event begin play, because we're going to need to grab some of our characteristics from our actual BP underscore first person character. So we're going to have to cast, unfortunately, but it's okay. Let's cast to our BP underscore first person character. Let's get our player character, and let's make sure that we make this a variable so we can use it throughout the project, which is what we need to do. Let's move that a little bit. Let's just make this BP underscore, or we can just make it first person ref, just so we know what we're talking about, and compile and save. Let's make sure we go over this and comment, and just make sure we know that this is, make sure we know that this is the begin play, and we can just keep it like that and just make it so it's over here. Next thing we want to do is go to our class settings and make sure that we're using our interact interface. If you don't have this interact interface, you can go to one of my previous videos and find the interact interface that I incorporated it in. And basically we're just going to be using that interact interface and branching off using the same type of logic that we used in our last tutorial. So we're going to want to go to the left, go to interfaces. Also, if you have your own interact interface, that'll be fine. We're just going to implement our interact, and our input is our BP underscore first person character. So it's very easy to incorporate. the first thing we're going to want to do is go from our character and set the move right puzzle that we created in the beginning, and we're going to set it to be false because we are not moving right in this type of obstacle or puzzle. We're then going to want to create a branch, and let's create that branch, and we're going to want to see basically if we're in the sphere collision 1, the close sphere collision or the inner sphere collision. So what we could do is we can go grab this inner sphere collision, and we're going to want to see if we're overlapping that is overlapping actor with our player character, so we can get player character. And the reason for this is because if we are overlapping, then we should be able to interact with it. So that's what we want to make sure of. So we'll grab this, and if we are, then we want to activate our camera right here. So let's grab this camera, and we want to activate it because now that means we want to actually see out of this camera. We're now interacting with this puzzle. The next thing we're going to want to do is make it so we can't actually move and like actually look around at all. So let's just make it so we disable movement. So the way to do that is go from our character, or we can use our blueprint reference, but it doesn't really matter. We can just go from here, and let's make it look nicer in a minute. Let's just get our character movement, and if we scroll all the way down, we should see our character movement, and we want to disable movement so that we cannot move for that moment while we're interacting with it. And let's do it like this and bring this up like so, just so we have a little reroute going, and so we can branch off of it a little later. Great, so now let's go to our, so we can't look around because we disabled our movement. Oops, we disabled our movement, but we want to make it so we can't look around as well. So let's get our player controller, because that's where we can dictate if we can look around or not. And let's basically just set ignore look inputs, and let's just set that to be true because we don't want to be able to look around right now. Let's bring it like so, just keep it organized. And let's make sure then that we actually, now we want to fade our camera. So we can use our camera fade event that we made previously. So we'll call camera fade or fade camera, and we're going to want to get our player camera manager, and that's pretty easy to just call. And then we're going to set our custom times. You can change these to whatever you'd like, but I found that 0.25, 0.5, and then 0.25 again does pretty well for a blink type of effect. So that'll work perfectly, and the target will be self because our camera is underneath self, so it'll work out perfectly. Now, like I said in the previous tutorials, we're going to want to make sure the duration between is the same as the delay right here. So let's just make the delay 0.5 as well and carry on. So the next thing we're going to want to do is make sure we tell the character, our first person character, that we are in a puzzle so that they know what to do with our movement when we press like W to move or anything like that. So let's set our is in puzzle to be true right here. So let's bring it down, and let's set that we are in the puzzle now. And then we're going to want to basically teleport our character to be in the correct position. And the correct position in this case is our start arrow. So we're going to want to make sure that we get our player character. So let's just get player character, and we can go off of this and get the root component. And we're going to want to make sure that we set this world transform, and not the message. We're just going to want to use the regular function and set the world transform, and easily enough we can split this and make sure that we make everything the right way. So let's just get the start arrow, which is where we're going to be teleporting to, and make sure that we get the world transform for that as well, and we're going to split that as well, just so we can get the only things we need, which are location and rotation. And basically what this is going to do is it's going to make sure that we teleport or set our world rotation and location to be at the exact position of the start arrow. After this, we're going to want to make sure that we set the control rotation so that it's the way that we're actually wanting to look and orientate. So let's set the control rotation, and you might have to turn off context sensitivity so you can actually grab this. Yeah, it'll be of controller. And so the target is going to be, well, first off, let's just get the player character, and make sure we go off of this and we get actor rotation. Great, and then off of this, let's bring it to new rotation, and let's go and get our player controller as well. And let's bring that to the target. So we can just do this and bring this up, just like so. And after this, we're going to want to basically symbolize that we're in the camera, and there's no way to really say that we're in the camera besides making a boolean and tracking it that way. So let's just make a boolean. This one doesn't have to be public, just as well as the reference doesn't have to be public. Let's just call this in cam, and this will basically make it so we can track if we're in the camera. So when we run our event tick nodes, we can immediately save performance and not call them all every second with all of our events. So let's say we are in the camera. So then we're going to want to set the view target with blend with the actual camera. So let's go off of our camera and let's make sure we get the owner, not this one, not that one. Let's get the owner component, which is going to make it so it's an actor so that we can bring it right into our set view target with blend right here. And that will be the new view target, yes. And then we're going to go off of this and make sure that our target itself is our player controller. So we're going to get player, oopsies, let's make sure it's context sensitivity, get player controller, just like so. Lastly, let's just clean it up really quickly. There's only 2 more things we want to do in this little spot right here for the on interact event. So let's just make sure that after this, we want to make sure that basically we are in the way that we usually move, so that we are in like the animation mode that we usually move and stuff like that. So let's just make sure that we set the animation mode. Let's just get our first person character. But in this case, we can just get player character as well, just to save a bit of performance. And let's just do it this way and get mesh and get the mesh of our character, and then go off of this and just set the animation mode just like so. And let's just use animation asset instead of blueprint, because we're going to want to basically set it so that we play a specific animation that we're going to make in a minute. Then let's make sure that we set the movement mode, and we can uncheck this. There's only one of them. So let's set the movement mode, and let's make it so that the new custom mode is nothing, but the movement mode itself is going to go like this. We're going to go off of it and get the default land movement mode. Let's grab this. I guess it hides it for whatever reason. Let's get it, and then let's go off of this and go to our character movement. You can always track it that way as well. So like we could have went for our character movement first and then did it that way, or you can go backwards and create it just like this. And this will be from our first person character. So get first person character reference. And we can do it just like so. Just make sure that's all lined up correctly. And now we have our on interact in the true condition. So basically, going over this one more time, we're going to interact with our object, and once we do, we're going to make sure that we set our move right puzzle to be false, and consequently change if we are, or look and see if we are inside of our inner sphere collision, because if we are, then we can interact with it. Let's make sure that we are looking at if we are in our camera, and so we are going to be in our camera. We're going to activate our camera, and then we're going to make it so we cannot move, we cannot look around, and that we actually cause a blink effect. Once we create that blink effect, we're going to wait a distance between, and then we're going to set it that we are in the puzzle. Once we're in that puzzle, we're then going to want to make sure that we set the world transform, or teleport the character basically. And so while we're teleporting the character, we can also set the control rotation, so we're looking in the right direction. Make sure that we are in the camera, because we are going to be using this variable later on, and basically doing standard things, but just changing our camera from our normal controller to be our camera in our blueprint now. After this, we're just going to make it so we can use whatever animation we want to use and make it so we can walk around. Now, before we get to our event tick and what that looks like every second that we are in this blueprint, let's actually just create our end overlap really quickly. So let's go to our end box collision, and let's add an event for the end overlap. Let's create that really quickly, and let's basically just handle all of this logic just so that we can have it done with. Since this is a pretty similar system, we're kind of just undoing the things that we just did right here. So we can comment on this, and we can just call it interact code. And this is basically just our code for interacting with this object, whatever object you want to interact with, obviously. So let's grab this, and let's see what the problem is right here. We have an issue with the target, which will be the character movement, just like so. So just make sure you do it like that. You always know the target by right underneath here, it says character movement component. So it's very simple to just understand that the target goes right to character movement. So like I was saying, let's go to our end box overlap, and let's make sure that we do somewhat of the similar effect right here. So let's go to our other actor, and let's make sure that we do an equal sign just to make sure that we are in the get player character. Make sure that we are using the character when we're overlapping this. Basically, if you have a UI, or not a UI, an AI, if it's overlapping, you don't want to make sure, or you want to make sure that it does not interact with it and actually able to use the pushable object or trigger any of your events. You don't want that to happen. So let's just make it like this, so it's only the player character. We can also change this and do an and bool, and we'll make it so if we're in first person, or if we're in the camera, or the in first person camera. It doesn't really make a difference, whatever you call this variable. If we're in this camera and we are doing this, then we are going to be in this condition. That means we interact with the thing and we are now leaving it. So now we can make it so we fade the camera back, basically. So let's just fade camera. Let's fade camera right back. So just doing it the same way we usually do. The target is self, but we want to get the player camera manager, and we can basically set it to be the exact same thing or a little bit shorter. I like to set this one to be a little bit shorter. So like in case there's an AI chasing you and you're doing a push object really quickly, you can always just 0.1 and make this 0.25 and make this 0.1. Similar to how we always do, let's make sure we do a delay right afterward. That's the duration of in between. So we're going to make it 0.25, just like so. And right afterward, we're going to do the same thing we did here. So let's just copy some of this. We're going to disable the character movement, and we're going to set ignore look input. We're going to grab the isn't puzzle and do it that way. We're going to basically make it so it's not in puzzle. And we're going to grab right here the set view target with blend and the animation modes. So we can grab those over, bring those over like so, and let's figure out which ones we want to use. So let's grab this first and let's just bring it over. So we're going to make it so we don't need this actually, but we do need this, and we're going to move this over and make it so we're not ignoring our look input anymore. And instead we are going to set the animation mode to be the one that we want to use. Let's see if I brought that over. Actually, let's bring that over as well. And let's set it so we are no longer in the puzzle as well. And most of these kind of can go synonymously wherever you would like them to go. So let's just move this over and set it not in puzzle and then do it this way. But most of them, they really don't make a difference which one goes first or afterward. It doesn't really change much. Let's also bring this over so we can change some of these settings with this. So let's change it. So now it's not an animation asset, but instead we are going to be using an animation blueprint, which is the one that's already on the character, just so that we can reference the one that we usually use. Our movement mode will be the same exact one, since we are still using the movement of the default land movement, which is our walking and stuff like that, or our running or crouching. After this, we're going to basically set our in cam to be false because we're no longer in cam. Yep, we're going to set it to be false because we're no longer in the camera, and we're then going to grab our camera and actually deactivate the camera. We can go off of this just like so, and then we're going to set the view target with blend. So let's just get our player controller, and we're going to set view target with blend and make sure it's set up like so, and make sure that the target is the player controller, because now we're going to be moving backward, and the new view is going to be straight to the first person reference. So now the new view is going to be the first person reference, and the old one was the player controller previously, also known as this camera. Now at the end here is a good methodology to use if you are creating the system, just so that you can make it so you don't have a situation where someone interacts with your bookshelf right here after you've already pushed it. So for example, if you're pushing this bookshelf and you're at this point now where you've uncovered the door, you don't want them to be able to interact with it again and push it again. That's not the point of it. It would be redundant and it wouldn't do anything good for your game. That would be a bug. So what we can do is we can go to our pushable object, and we can also close all these because we're no longer using them. We can go to our event graph, and we're actually going to make it so we spawn a new object that is basically the same one as the one we have now. It'll look the same to the player, but it will not have any of the functionalities, making it so basically it's virtually nothing except for just a shell. So what we could do is let's go to our blueprints folder, and what we'll do is we'll go to blueprint class, go to actor, and basically create a BP underscore, and let's just call it P object. And basically that's just for pushable object, but it's just the case, basically just the shell. So let's create a static mesh. And again, it's not going to have any components. It's basically just going to be a static mesh, just like so. The only thing we're going to want to do in here is just change it to be pushed object, just so it's a little bit more clear what this static mesh is. But after this, we can actually leave this blueprint and go straight back to our pushable object. And now we're going to actually use that blueprint. So let's go off of this and spawn actor from class. And the class that we're going to use is the one we just created. It's going to be BP underscore P object. That's going to be the new object, and we can split this transform just so we can grab the ones that we actually want. So let's go to our static mesh here, and if we're using this static mesh, we can get the world location and make sure that it all matches up right here. So let's just get the world transform so then we can split it and get the rotation and the location. let's go like this, and let's split this like I said, so we can get the location and rotation. But just to make sure that your character is not clipping inside of the static mesh, what we can do is we can add, and let's just add in the X direction just so that you are not clipping into it. Let's do it like so and move it back, and let's grab the rotation, and basically that's going to be the exact same. So just move it like this and do it like so, and move that up. And then the scale, we're actually going to want to make sure that we utilize a scale that we can create ourselves. So we actually did already. It's the object scale right here. Basically just want it to be the exact same one that we created earlier, just so that it's not a bigger or smaller object than it was when we previously made it. Pretty cool system. It just makes it so now everything aligns with the way that we want it. So now we've spawned this actor, but we're going to want to make sure that we, let's see, is there any other node? No, I don't think so. We're going to want to make it so we can actually change the static mesh, because right now it's still a blank static mesh. So let's go off of this and let's get our pushed object. Get pushed object. Let's see if we can find it. There it is. We're going to find that pushed object, and we're basically just going to want to set static mesh pretty simply. And we're going to want to go like so, and just basically change the new mesh to be the object mesh that we set as a variable. So right here, there's an object mesh. Let's just bring it like so. And whatever that was, what we set in our actual blueprint, it will change it to now be that mesh as well. And we're going to have to create a little bit of a delay just so everything can register. And then after like 0.2 seconds, we can leave it. We're going to destroy the actor that we are currently in, which is the pushable object. And we're then going to only have this new spawned actor right here. So yeah, this logic, I'll go over it really quickly. In addition, just so you guys can really understand it, but let's just call this end. Oops, that's not working. Let's go back to it. Make sure we check that, and let's just call it end overlap, or like pushed to location code. Because now basically what this means is when we're ending that overlap, we're in that new location that we want to be at, so we can end it just like so. So going over this really quickly, we're going to basically, when we end overlap, we're going to check and make sure that it is a player character, so it's not an AI or something like that in your game, and so it doesn't trigger this event. And we're also going to check and make sure that we are in the camera. We only want this to trigger once you're in the camera. For example, if you're walking right here, normally past it, you don't want any of this to happen, only when you're in the camera. So we're going to make sure that we're in the camera, and then we're going to make sure we fade the camera like a blink effect. We're going to wait that distance between, and we're going to set everything we need. So we need it to not be in a puzzle anymore. We need to be able to look around. We need to be able to make sure that we can use our animation blueprint that we normally have, as well as our movement mode that we normally have, which is default land mode. We're going to make it so we're not in the camera anymore, as well as deactivate the camera, and then set the view target back to the original camera from the first person reference. After that, we're going to spawn the new actor, which will be basically a shell or a placeholder of this current actor. That's going to have the same static mesh, but right here we're just making sure we're setting the static mesh with the scale that we have and the static mesh position, but just 5 difference, so we're a little bit behind it. After that, we're going to set the static mesh with the static mesh that we set per object, and then we're going to wait a second and destroy this actor so we can save performance and this isn't running anymore per second. Let's bring this down and compile and save. I also thought about it. Let's go to our construction script, and we can add one more pin if you would like, and you can basically add a pin for the end box collision so that you can change when you want to end your collision event. So basically, if it's a smaller door and you only want to push it a little bit of a distance, you can make it so you can change this dynamically. So what we can do is we can go to our construction script, go to then for, and go off of that, and basically grab our end box collision, and we want to set the world location or relative location, and so we can go off of this and get world location. Oops, not that. Let's go like this. Get the world location, and we can make sure that we just basically add this. So it's the same exact logic. We're just going to go like this, and we're going to basically create this and promote it as a variable. This variable will be the end location offset, or to make it more like all the other variables, we'll make it end offset location, and that will now be the new location for the collision. Which again, the collision is basically the ending point for when you want to stop pushing the object. So we can put that right to N4, and we can keep it just like so. And now if I go right into the first person map, I can show you. If I go right to here, did we put it into, oh, I don't think I made it public, which is a vital component of it. So let's just go to it and let's put it into the character settings. So let's go to character settings and let's compile and save, and let's actually utilize this event or utilize this logic. So if we go right here, you can see that right here we have the box for the collision. If I change this to -50, you can see that now it'll basically stop pushing it a lot sooner than if it was all the way where it normally is. Conversely, our camera, we can change that location like really easily. You can see right there, if I put a variable right there, it'll change that. And our character offset location, you can't see right now, but basically it'll change this so that we can spawn in a different area, like right there. You would never want to spawn it in the actual mesh, but you get what I'm saying. Now we're going to want to do a little bit of a harder part of the tutorial, which is creating the animation for the character. So when they push, they kind of have that same animation throughout. So what we can do is we can, oops, my engine is lagging a little bit. We can grab our one that we used earlier and just basically bring the mesh that we created or that we got from Sketchfab. So we can grab that and let's just make sure we size it up to be 100, 100, and 100. And so now we kind of have a basis of what it would look like. So we can bring it right in front and just, oops, just make it so it goes up like to where it would be. And this is for whatever object you're using, you can kind of do it this way. And basically we're going to want to change the arm position of it to match up with this bookshelf so that it looks like we're actually pushing it. So what we could do is we can go to select mode, animation mode, and let's go and open up our cinematics and our animation forming cinematic just so we can actually utilize this. So let's go to our right here. Let's bring our player, our mesh for our cinematic, and let's bring it over just like so. And we're going to want to actually make sure that we have no type of configuration like this whatsoever, so we can create a brand new one. What we could do is we could just go over all this and delete all these nodes. So let's just bring it like so and right click and delete or cut. So now we have no nodes. And if we just save it, you'll see it like that. But if it doesn't reset like it should, we can just go and delete this actor like so, and now we'll have no actor. And we can right click and make sure that we delete this as well. So we can delete this just like so, and we can bring in a new actor like how we did previously. So we can look for the sk underscore Quinn, and it's skm I believe for skeletal mesh. So we can bring it in just like so, and now we can go back to our sequencer, add track, load the actor to the sequencer and just add it like so. So now we will see the control rig. Let's bring it just like this. And let's go to the CR mannequin body so we can change some of the animation poses and everything like that. I will be leaving the download for the animation that I used in the description below, but if you want to make it so you can learn how to make your own as well, that's perfectly fine. So what you can do is you can look for where your arms would be, so where they would normally bend. They'd probably bend around here, and you want them to kind of rotate to align with how it normally would be. So we're going to have it just like this. We rotate this up so it looks like we're actually pushing, and then grab our fingers and make them more straight potentially, just like so, and grab this and push it up so it looks more straight, and do the same thing with this one, just make it more straight. And again, this is something that you can tinker with and make it look just how you would like. But for the simplicity of this, I'm going to just try to make it somewhat simply. So let's make this so it goes like more up and more up for this as well. Let's move this back a tiny bit. Maybe let's move it up. I'm not sure. Let's see. These are all just kind of like guess and checking just to see how it kind of looks in the actual project. So that looks pretty good just for the moment at least. And so what we can do is we can move this elbow to be exactly where we want it to be. So let's move it like this, and let's move it over. And remember, they're never going to actually see this. Like the player is never going to see this. They're just going to see the hands. So what we can do is we can move it across and move it like this, and basically move it so it looks like it's actually pushing it just like so. And we can maybe move it a little bit back or unsnap and move it just like this to see where it like actually hits. Right there looks like a pretty good spot. And what we can do is we can do the exact same thing with this one. So we'll just move this over and move it up, and then move the wrist to be rotated around 90 degrees, and then change the location of the elbow to be pushed like so we can move it over, move it back. And I don't know if you want them to be right next to each other or if you want one to be higher than the other, but this looks pretty good. You can move it back a little bit more if you would like, but remember, let's actually tweak some of this really quickly. So what we can do is we can go to each finger and find the bottom arrow for the finger so we can adjust the orientation like so. Let's grab it like this, orientate it up, and orientate this one up as well. And then we're going to basically go to this and rotate it up a bit. Rotate this up like so. I think that one actually rotates the whole thing, so we can do it like that. And make sure that we also grab this thumb and we twist it to be a little bit more like we're pushing. So there you go. And we can adjust it so that it maybe goes forward a bit or something like that, so it actually looks like we're pushing it. So great, this looks like pretty good for what I'm actually looking for. So I'll grab the elbow one more time just to make it so, or actually I'll just grab this and rotate it a little bit up so it's not in that, and more like this. And maybe make these fingers a little bit more like they're, make these fingers a little bit more like they're on the actual wall, so maybe like right here. But again, that's not really, the animation part isn't really the purpose of this tutorial. It's more so just to show you how to make something like this. So great, now we have something like this, and if we need to, we can change how high it is. So if we want it to be a little bit higher so we can really see the hands, or if you want it to be like this maybe, and so you can really see the hands, you can do it like so, and now you'll be able to see it like that. What we'll do is we'll save all. We'll make sure that we go all the way up right here, and we make this a key just like so, and we can make it a key right here as well, since when you're pushing something it's kind of the same exact hand position throughout. And we can right click and we can make sure that we bake animation sequence, and let's go to our animations folder under our first person, and we'll just save it just like so, and we'll call it push object, and we'll just create it like that. We'll call it UE5 underscore push object, and we'll just put it right in our animations and export animation set. So now if we go to our content and if we go to our first person animations, we can see the UE5 underscore push object. So now you can see that we're pushing the object like so, and some of it may be deformed. Again, it's because I kind of rushed with it, but you can do it however you would like and create it to be just how you would like. I can do both of these ones that I've created in the downloads below. So now that we have this animation, let's start working on our event tick so that we can create what it would look like. So we can go out of animation mode, go back to select mode, and we can let go of this. We can delete both of these, or just keep this one here if you're still doing animating with other things as well. But let's go back to our pushable object and let's start working on the event graph for the event tick. So let's go underneath and let's get the event tick just like so. And let's start working on that logic. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to check and see if we are in the puzzle. So what we'll do is we'll get our first person camera, or first person reference, excuse me, and we'll see is in puzzle, and we'll get that value. And if we are in the puzzle, then we want to continue on with this branch to see more, because if we're not in that puzzle, then it basically means that we're not actually interacting with this object. We're not trying to push it along or whatever. So let's go off of this and just see now if we are in the camera. So we can go off of this and create another branch and just see if we are in camera, in cam. Great, so now that we have the in cam, we're going to want to make sure that we are actually moving forward, because now we know that we're in the camera, which means that we are in the puzzle. Both of these are true. So now we're trying to either move forward to push the object, or we're staying still for whatever reason, if the character chooses to stay still. So if we're in the camera, we're going to basically make it so we're pushing forward. So we're going to want to create another branch, and we're basically going to see if we, from the player controller, if we're pushing down a certain key. So we can grab this, go here, and is input key down. And just like so, we can get this and go to our return value and bring that right to our condition. Let's move them forward and move it just like so, so it's a little bit more lined up. So is our input key down, and the key specifically will be W. If you're using gameplay, like gamepad or whatever, you can always change this to whatever you would like, or just create an or bool, or if it's or some other key or some other key, and so on. After this, we're going to go off of our true and play an animation on our skeletal mesh. So let's get our first person character reference once again, just grab it like so, and let's get our mesh. And off of our mesh, we're going to actually want to call these play animation nodes just so that we can animate our sequence or animate our skeletal mesh from our sequence. So let's go and grab our begin push animation. You can see that's obstruction, but we have one with push object. That's the one that we want. And we're going to make sure that we loop this, and we can, we can put that back. We can put that for the true and the false, but there's going to be a difference between both. Basically, if you are true, we're going to be actually moving the character, but if it's false, then we want to just play that animation. Also, if you want to create an idle animation for if it's idly, like hands on it, versus if you're actually pushing, you're more than welcome to do so. So now that we know that we're going to make it so off of this, we're actually pushing, we're moving forward with the W key, then we're going to set the world location of the camera and everything else to be matching with the character. The way that we do that is by going and getting our camera and then going off of this and making sure we get the world location where it usually, or where it normally is, where it is right now, and splitting this value so we can get the X, Y, and Z component. Basically, we're going to want to push it in one direction so that it can be pushed forward and not have to interfere with anything else, so that it always goes only in one direction. So if you're making the same exact system but you're doing it in a different direction, for example the Y direction, then you're going to want to make sure the plus is off of the Y. But for my example, it's off of the X. So I will be going off of this, and I will be setting the world location of this new one just like so, based on the old one. So it'll keep all the same directions for the Y and the Z, but what we'll be updating is the X direction. So just like so, we're going to be moving it along, and we're going to just make sure it's all aligned. We can do it just like so, bring that up, bring that just like this, and bring that down. And the Y and the Z will stay just as they are now, and we'll just feed right in just like I said, so they stay the exact same. Now off of our plus value, we're going to be getting a certain value that will be certainly increasing as time goes on. That value we can get from our event tick itself, so we can grab this and do a multiply by 100, and that will basically make it so it's going by seconds itself. So let's go from our event tick and do it just like so, and bring it so basically it'll be 100 centimeters per second basically. So we can go off of this, and we can go straight here, and so it'll increase by 100 centimeters per second. And if you want to walk a little bit slower or walk a little bit faster, you can always choose that based on this value. So you can bring it just like this, and we can create a reroute node just so we can go and utilize this for the other nodes as well, because they look very similar. So we're going to basically be doing this for the static mesh as well as the character as well, because that's what we'll be moving. So let's bring our character so we can basically copy this and bring this over. And we're going to be applying the same exact logic, but now instead of camera, it's going to be the static mesh, because the wall itself will have to be moving, or the bookshelf, or whatever you have the object to be. So we're going to have it like so, and we can just go to this target really quickly. Oh, this is also going to be mesh. I completely forgot. We're going to want to make sure that's also the mesh. And let's go right back to where we were. So that's going to be the same. And then similarly, like how this was, this is also going to be going in that other add slot right there. So they're both going to be added, and we can make this look a little bit nicer just by hitting Q and highlighting over all of it. And there will be one more, and that one is basically going to be the actual first person reference, so that our animation, our character with all of its animations is also moving forward. So we can do the same exact thing, bring this and just copy and just paste, and move this over here and go to set world location, and let's just move it like so it's all connected. And let's change this to be our player reference, go off of this and get our root component. If you don't want to do that, you can also just do this and it creates the root component for you. We could do that, bring it over, and make sure that our root component is also our get world location target, so that everything is all aligned. And that's all you really need. So what we'll do is we'll just comment over this. We'll go to our event tick, and it's not commenting again. Let's go to event tick just so we know exactly what this is, and we can do it like so. And we'll go over it again really quickly. So basically, we're going to want to check if we are in the puzzle. If we're not in the puzzle, then we're not going to want to interact with this at all. Like, we're not interacting, so we shouldn't call any of this code every single second. Now, If we are in the puzzle, but we aren't at this stage where we need to call the in-camera events, then we're going to stay calling false until we are. But since we are at this certain position, we're going to keep moving forward, and we're going to play an animation sequence on our character mesh based on if we are pressing W or moving forward in the actual world or not. If we are moving forward and pressing W, or whatever key you want it to be, we will be updating the camera position, the static mesh position, which is the bookshelf itself for whatever object you set it to be, as well as the actual blueprint for the character. And if we're not, we're just going to be playing the idle mesh animation for our character and keeping it just like that. We want to make sure they're both looped, by the way, and we're basically going off of delta seconds and utilizing a multiply by 100 just so it's 100 centimeters per second. You can do 50 and it'll be 50 centimeters per second. So in theory, if this was mine, I would right click on this, promote it to a variable, and make sure that this is also under the character settings. So we have basically the character speed, how fast we want to push certain objects. So yeah, you could do that if you would like to as well. Just make sure it's also public and you edit it here. So now what we'll do is we'll go to our first person map, just like so, and let's right click and play from here. And what we'll do is we'll go into here and see if we right click or if we press E. So we're in it now. Let's try to move forward. And if we move forward, you can see we're moving with it, but we do not see the actual character moving. So let's see why that's happening. Let's go right back in and let's right click, play from here. And if we press E, we do not see our thing, but what we can check is we are actually doing the animation. We're just not at the point where it's playing on the thing. So what we can do is we can go back and click on here, and we know that we need to be closer to the actual mesh itself. So I can try putting some of the values that I use. So for example, I had 11, 5, and then 10 for the camera offset. So we can try some of these and see how these work for this actual set. So let's see, let's go back and play from here. And this part is kind of just guessing and checking. We can go and no, we can't see anything right now. So we can change that again. Let's just make it so the camera off or the character offset is a bit closer. So let's just change it to like 15, or we can even try 20 just so we can really figure out which value it is. So now we can see that we're in the head kind of, so we're a little bit we're almost there, but not at the position we actually want to be. So what we can do is we can go back and tinker with this value, and I'll adjust them. They'll be per animation basis. Basically how you made your animation is how they're going to be on your actual mesh. So I realized why some of it was actually happening. Basically it was a little bit off the ground, so it was making it so it was a little bit higher than it was actually supposed to be. I also went back to the pushable object and I rotated the camera down a little bit, so you can copy these if you would like to see more of your actual hand animations. So I found for my hand in my animation placement that these values worked pretty well. So as you can see now, if you right click and go into play here, if I go to right here and if I go forward, you can see now that it is moving forward, and we can basically go to our certain position and then we go out. And now if I try to click on it again, nothing will happen because now this is just a basic shelf that we spawned in right afterward. So you can see if we go back, and if we don't like a certain thing with the camera, so for example, if I wanted to now be higher because I realized it was on the ground, I can do that. I can go from play from here and click on it, and now you can see that it's a little bit higher, or if I even want it to be even higher than that, it does not matter. You can change it to whatever you would like. So we can have it all the way up there if you would like, play from here, and you can see now dynamically you can change where everything is, and you can have everything playing just how you would like. And now you can go right back to where you want. If there was a door, for example, right there. So I'll show you how that would look. In addition to showing how it would look with the bookshelf blocking the way of the door, I also want to show how to fix the obstruction wall if you are using both systems, since they use some of the same mechanics. So if you go to the obstruction wall, you want to make sure that you have the same thing that the pushable object has in the very beginning on the interact interface. So right here I have the move right puzzle being false immediately on interact, and right here I have the move right puzzle being true. So if I go in and if I interact with one, so for let's say I go into here and interact with the obstruction puzzle, I will be able to go through it just like normal, how we always do. And if I go out of it, you'll see that once I go back to the door, it will be the exact same mechanic being used, but I'm not going to have any problems with interacting with one or the other. So let's go right to the shelf and let's interact with it, and you'll see that now I'm moving forward, but I'm using the same exact mechanic. I pushed out of the way and I made a specific distance, so it wasn't all the way over here. I made the distance right here, and you can see now I can interact with the door as well, and everything works all together. Now, just for simplicity, I want to show my other project as well, just so I can show you that you can have multiple of these type of pushable objects. So you can see right here, I have a object right here on the book with the bookshelf, and I have an example object, which is just some cube. For the cube, I can just make the character settings whatever they need to be with the scale and the mesh, whatever I want to change, and the same thing right here. And just a reminder, they won't be the exact same unless they're the same exact dimensions, so you'll need to change up the character offset, or the camera offset as well. But you can see once you go in here, you can interact with it. And so for example, if I go to this first, I can move it, and of course you can change the hand position and the animations to whatever you'd like to be, but I move it out of the way, and now I cannot interact with it anymore. And if I go to this one as well, I can move it out of the way of the door, just like I did in the previous example. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, it would be really appreciated if you could like, subscribe, and comment down below more videos you guys would like to see in the future. Again, if you would like to get this tutorial along with all my other tutorials I've created on this channel and ones to come in the future, you can always go to my Patreon, where I will be putting these files and also having this video as early access, so you can watch it earlier there, along with all my other videos as well. So yeah, thank you again for watching, and have a great day, guys.